Well, hello, you fabulous humans. I'm your host, C. Eshelman, and yes, I can see you, and I know you are fabulous. So welcome here today. Hey, I have this idea that the word attachment gets thrown around quite a lot in our worlds when we're doing work with children from difficult beginnings, but sometimes it's not made simple enough, perhaps, for us all to really truly understand. So today, I just want to do a brief conversation with you about ACEs, which means adverse childhood experiences, and how that intersects with your attachment style. I know that sounds like, what? What's she talking about? So I'm going to try and make it super simple. So for those of you who have clinical understanding of attachment, don't worry, this isn't going to go deep. This is just an overview to give you ways of talking about some of the things that you might be seeing in your families or in your friends who have children from difficult beginnings. First of all, what I want to say to you all, and I've said this before and I'm going to keep saying it, parents are the number one change agents in a traumatized child's life. Not the therapist, not the next door neighbor, not the minister. Nope, none of that. You parents. You are so, so important. Everything a parent does in life really impacts their children. And especially that time between conception and 33 months, that's about 2 years. That period imprints the child for the future, right? For its entire lifetime. And some of us who have children from difficult beginnings, we didn't get them in the hospital. We didn't get them in the first 33 months of their lives. And so we didn't have a chance to imprint them. So they come to us with their own imprinted attachment style from whatever happened to them before they get to us. That said, it doesn't mean that you can't make an impression on a child's imprint. For sure you can. However, you have to use your own attachment in order to make that change in that child's life. And so you have to really understand where you're coming from and what happened to you. So what happened to you in your childhood created your life and your experiences, but also it created your attachment style. And those are the important pieces to the puzzle for how you engage your child from difficult beginnings and how your ACEs intersect with their ACEs. Those are the difficult things that happen to them in childhood and that happen to you. And then how your attachment style evolved as a result of what happened to you. So I know that maybe sounds a little convoluted, but it actually goes together, and I'll say a little bit more in a second. If you haven't had a chance to take the Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire, I really want to encourage you to take it. You can just Google that on any browser, ACES, ACES, and you're going to bring up the quiz or the questionnaire. And it's really just 10 questions. The original one. Now, you might find some that have evolved since the study, but for right now, if you find the 10-question quiz, great, take that. Well, let me explain to you what the ACES questionnaire really does. So that 10-question questionnaire was given to a lot of people at Kaiser Permanente in conjunction with the CDC. They did the biggest study of childhood impacts on disease, right, that had ever been done. I think, and I don't want to be talking out of turn, but I think it was like 19,000 people. It's a really big study. You may have heard Nadine Burke-Harris, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who was in charge of that program. She did a lot to spread the word about trauma and then the impact of trauma on people's mental health and wellness later in life. Go ahead and take that quiz if you come across it, because it might surprise you to find out how many ACEs you have. And what she did is she looked at how many different kinds of adverse experiences you had. And as they add up, then there was a direct correlation between how they added up, how many they added up to, and then what later in life you might unfold in your wellness. So the ACEs questionnaire really falls around 5 personal questions. And it's really to be answered in your lifetime under 18 years old. So what happened to you in your childhood? So it's looking at the first 5 personal issues would be physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, and emotional neglect. Those are the first 5 personal abuses. The second 5 are related to other family members. So for example, if you were raised in a family with a parent who was an alcoholic, a mother who's a victim of domestic violence, a family member in jail, a family member diagnosed with a mental illness, or the disappearance of a parent through divorce, death, or abandonment. Each type of trauma counts as 1. So a person who's been physically abused that's 1. With one alcoholic parent, that's 2. And a mother who was beaten up by her partner, that's an ACEs score of 3. And then you would look on the research and you would see that 3 ACEs in childhood correlates statistically to certain kinds of mental health and medical diseases later in life. I'm going to tell you about some of them, but not all of them at all. I'm just going to give you some examples that might really surprise you. If you know anything about me, you know that I came from difficult beginnings myself, and I have 9 ACEs. So when I took the test, I had 9. I have never been sexually abused as a child, and so that is the only ACE I don't have. And so I was kind of surprised when I took this test because I had told people for years, oh, I had a great childhood. Now, I don't exactly know why I said that. I just thought everybody had the same childhood. And so I thought mine was just normal. But of course, it's not normal to have an alcoholic father, a father who goes to jail, domestic violence on the regular in your house. On and on, right? It just goes on. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have a serious trauma history. And then when I look at my wellness and my mental health and the diseases I developed over time, because I'm older now, I'm like, oh, look, I'm one of the statistics. Well, shoot. I wish I had known that earlier. I might have eaten better or taken better care of my mental health early on, but I really didn't know how that was going to make a difference in my life. So I'm going to say this to you, and you're probably wondering about now as well, how does this have anything to do with my attachment style? And how does this have anything to do with parenting children from difficult beginnings? I promise I'm going to get to that. But for right now, I want to just give you a few statistics. If you have one adverse childhood experience, then you are 6% more likely than the person who doesn't have that to have adult alcoholism. If you have 3 ACEs, you are 11% more likely to struggle with alcoholism. But if you have 4 or more ACEs, you are 16% more likely to struggle with alcoholism in your lifetime. So that may not surprise you. You may be like, oh yeah, of course, if your dad drinks, and be likely that you are genetically predisposed to drinking. And that makes sense, right? Some of these things make sense. Genetically speaking and environmentally speaking, those things make sense. But there are others that just don't really make sense, except the trauma impacts the mind-body complex across your lifetime. So here's another one that's very similar to alcoholism: adverse childhood experiences and smoking, right? So if you have 4 to 5 ACEs, you are 13% more likely to smoke as an adult. If you have 6 or more ACEs, you are 17% more likely to smoke as an adult. That's again, now my father was a smoker, so of course I was exposed to that. I've seen people use that as a stress reducer, as an entertainment, as a way to get away from other people. I've seen smoking used by my father in lots of different ways. So of course, I have that imprint in my mind about, well, smoking relieves stress, so why not start? Now, it just so happens I never smoked. It doesn't appeal to me, and I just never got that particular lesson, thank goodness, because I really don't want to be a smoker. But anyway, that's another one similar to alcoholism, right? If it's in your environment, of course, you're going to be more likely to do it. But here's one that doesn't make any sense. If you have 3 ACEs in your history, in your childhood, you are a little more than 10% likely to attempt suicide. If you have 4 or more ACEs, you are almost 20% more likely to attempt suicide. Now we're talking, that's kind of scary, right? That's 1 in 5 people who are suicidal because of their early childhood experiences. Okay, here's another one. If you are a woman and you have 5 or more ACEs, you're 10% more likely to actually perpetrate domestic violence. If you're a man and you have 5 or more ACEs, you are approximately 14% more likely to perpetrate domestic violence against someone else. And here's one that just really amazes me in a way. If you have 4 or more ACEs, you are 25% more likely to have early sex, for example, than say people with 0 ACEs who are only 5% likely to have sex in their teen years. Now, here's one that's kind of amazing to me. If you have 4 or more ACEs in your childhood, you are 40% more likely to become pregnant. 40% more likely if you have 4 or more ACEs. That's such a huge number. And then if you are a boy, if you have 4 or more ACEs, you are about 34% more likely to have paternity, right? To get somebody pregnant. So these are super huge numbers. And so when we wonder about why our children are precocious sexually, and we often blame it on the internet or we blame it on social media, the truth is there may be something else at work here, because there's something underlying those things, right? Those things didn't start until later in life. And so the ACEs come at you from the start of your life. Here's another really disturbing discovery around well-being. If you have 4 or more ACEs, you are more than 32% more likely to be raped as an adult. Isn't that a strange correlation? But it is, which means that you haven't learned good boundaries. You haven't learned to take good care of yourself, your self-care around being with people who might be dangerous to you, being able to assess for danger, having your awareness high so that you don't, and I'm not blaming any victims for being raped at all. However, there are circumstances that we can put ourselves in that increase the likelihood that something bad will happen to us. And that's often because our early childhood experiences were extreme. And then this one, which kind of blows my mind too. This one is about antidepressant prescriptions. If you are an adult who has 4 ACEs, you are 93% more likely to be taking an antidepressant by the time you're 50 years old. And if you have 5 or more ACEs, you are nearly 100% taking an antidepressant by the time you are 50 years old. So think about that. I'm not really making a comment about taking an antidepressant or not taking it. I'm saying that you are more likely to be depressed or highly anxious so that you end up taking some kind of antidepressant to manage your mental health. So, okay, shake that off a little bit, because it's kind of hard. Those statistics are kind of hard if you haven't been exposed to them before. Don't worry, if you have 10 ACEs, you have time always to get better. I mean, even though I didn't know about my ACEs score until later in life, hey, I instantly began putting myself on a healthier path because I didn't want to have those negative outcomes. So wherever you are in your development or in your aging process, I mean, it's never too late to begin to take care of your mental health, to de-stress, to look at what happened to you so that you can perhaps recover from trauma, and then also to take better medical care of yourself. Let's talk about how attachment is created. So attachment is a human imperative. And what that means is that when you're born, you are born with a desire to attach to the person who birthed you, right? So you come right out of the birth canal seeking the voice, the smell, the experience of the person you've spent 9 months in the womb with. That's a human imperative. And so when you come out, you go seeking. So if you have a neurotypical parent with no trauma, which is maybe almost rare these days, but let's say that those people exist, and I know they do, I'm just teasing, and you have healthy pregnancy, you do all the right things, and the birth is easy and successful, and the baby comes out with all the right things and meet all the APGAR scores and all of that. Then when the baby's put into the arms of the parent, of the mommy, then what happens is an immediate attachment, an immediate love experience between the mom and the child. And that's how come people say we're born for love, because that's what we are. That's what that is. It's an instant attachment and love experience that grows from there. And so secure attachment in life comes from the first 33 months being secure. Means that you got fed when you were hungry, you got changed when you were wet, you got attended to when you were fussy, you got good sleep, you got good nutrition, and somebody paid attention to you as you needed in a good enough way so that when you cried, you got attended to. And when you got attended to, you soothed. And once you soothed, you went back into being quiet. And then you didn't cry again until you had another need. And your parent met that need. It's not 100%, but it's good enough, right? If you meet that need good enough over and over and over and over again, that's the cycle that leads to secure attachment. That is how we all come to be attached, whether we had a solid, secure attachment with no trauma and no separations and no birth trauma and no exposure in utero, et cetera, right? If we had no adverse childhood experiences from conception through the first 2 years, then we likely have a secure attachment. However, if that cycle gets interrupted by anything, it could be interrupted by birth trauma, it could be interrupted by domestic violence in utero, it could be interrupted by a medical procedure that happens right at birth, or mother, let's say, has postpartum and is not able to attach, or let's say that the mother gets sick with something and can't attend to the baby as she would want to because she's too sick to do it. Or let's say the baby actually has colic and is very, very, very fussy from colic. And after a while, the mother loses her ability to attend. Then there's a breach in their attachment, and that can interrupt some of the attachment. Now, it doesn't destroy the attachment at all if one thing happens, because it can be repaired. But if more than one thing happens and it persists over time, then it becomes an imprint in your psyche, which later will become your attachment style. And it becomes your attachment style based then on the other experiences you had in early childhood. I want to talk about the 4 styles of attachment, one of which you may have. Now, attachment styles are overlapping, meaning you can be secure and a little anxious. You can be secure and a little anxious ambivalent, a little anxious avoidant. They overlap. Very few people fit 100% in any one category. But there is a tendency to lean toward one. So the 4 styles are secure, and it's called secure in children, and it's secure in adults. And then there's insecure. One is called anxious ambivalent in children, and in adulthood, that same style becomes preoccupied in adults. The 3rd style is insecure avoidant in children, and in adulthood, it becomes dismissive. And then lastly, insecure disorganized is called disorganized in children, and it's disorganized in adulthood as well. So those are the 4 styles. And I'm going to just say a little bit about each one and I told you I was going to just do a simplistic overview. So this is that. If we're talking about secure, we're talking about someone who has a good ability to be reciprocal with other people. They can give love, they can receive love, they can be angry, they can be happy, they can feel their feelings. They can share their feelings. They're not perfect by any means, but they have an ability to be flexible in their lives, flexible in their emotions, flexible with other people. Flexibility turns out to be one of the hallmarks of the securely attached person. They're able to maintain their sense of well-being and who they are in the face of other people's distress. Even though they can lean in and meet that other person, they don't lose their identity. They don't lose their security that way. So they don't become disorganized. When a disorganized person comes into their life, they stay secure. And so if you're lucky enough to have that attachment style, then you're blessed and your children are blessed, because if you have a secure style, you are going to be the easiest and best healer for your children who come to you perhaps with less than secure attachment styles themselves. Now, that's not to say that the rest of us are cursed. I, of course, do not have secure because of my 9 ACEs, but I have earned my security over time. There's something called earned security. And that's when over time you have done enough healing in your trauma. You have learned to accept love and help and accept your humanness and accept the humanness of other people. And you have become more flexible over time because you did healing. And that's called earned secure attachment. And at this point in my life, I have earned secure attachment. I haven't always had it, but in the last, say, 20 years, I've had it, which feels so great because I had avoidant attachment style early on. It really wreaked havoc in my life because I felt like I didn't need anybody and I did everything myself and I didn't accept help. I never asked for help. I was proud of myself that I never needed help, right? It's not great to be proud of yourself that you never need help because, of course, I'm human and I do need help. I just did everything the hard way. And I never asked for help, which would have made it a little bit easier. And I could have felt like life was a little less difficult. Okay, so let's pop back up to insecure. So if you have insecure, anxious, ambivalent attachment, which is preoccupied in adulthood, you're preoccupied with connection or the loss of connection in relationships. You anticipate abandonment, so you might abandon first. You approach attachment issues with anger, which covers up your fear of abandonment. You're assured when a trusted other can tolerate your anger and approaches you with love. If some of that resonates for you and you are parenting a traumatized child, you might be triggered by your child. And these are the things you might see yourself doing or trying to resist really hard doing. Like you might seek love from your child intrusively. You might need affirmations of affection from your child. You might have some trouble bonding. You might get hurt often, disappointed, and ultimately angry when challenged by your child. You might feel unloved when your child doesn't do as you want. You might run kind of hot and cold in your relationship with your child, and you might fear your child's anger, ambivalence, and rejection. And ultimately, in an extreme way, you might reject or cut off from your child, ultimately. Those are the things to be aware of. And then if you find yourself doing them, you might seek help. And if you don't have that available, what you can do is investigate secure attachment behaviors. What are those? And then begin to lean toward secure by acting secure. I know that sounds crazy, but acting just means practicing. Practicing secure skills will change your relationship with other people. So that's my suggestion to you. And also if you have the other two as well. Okay, the third attachment style is insecure avoidant, and it's called dismissive in adulthood. So if you happen to lean toward this attachment style, then you might be dismissive in intimate relationships. You might fear vulnerability. You might be fiercely independent. You might feel superior to other attachment styles because you don't need anybody. You might have difficulty accepting help and taking in love. You might keep distance in relationships, and you might deny your own needs and dismiss the needs of others. So, of course, we're talking about at the extreme end. And when people have a style, it's not 100%, right? A lot of times you're just secure, and under stress, you become more avoidant or more dismissive. So if you're raising a traumatized child and you have insecure avoidant style, your child may trigger you to parent from afar, to just keep your distance from them, maybe be a little utilitarian. You might avoid your home life. You might work too much or busy up around the house or busy yourself up in volunteer activities or things out in the world. You might treat your child like a little adult. You might misattune to your child's vulnerable feelings and needs. You might abandon them emotionally. And I said this already, but I'll say it again. You might be more utilitarian rather than connected. You might resist eye contact, affection, and easy praise, and you might push them away with anger. Again, if you find yourself under stress leaning in this direction, then you want to really investigate secure attachment behaviors so that you can begin to practice doing something differently than you're inclined to do under stress. And raising children from difficult beginnings is super stressful. And so you're stressed more than you want to be most of the time. And so your attachment style, which may have been somewhat dormant before you had children, is like, whoa, right in your face when you get kids who are pulling for your attachment style to come out, because that's all they're trying to do is get attachment, and you're trying to survive what they're doing. And so that brings your attachment style forward, and it's often not the secure part. The last style is called insecure disorganized, and it's disorganized in adulthood also. I'll be honest with you, this is considered the most disturbing attachment style because it is so disturbing to the person who has it. If you have this style, you'll be easily emotionally dysregulated. You'll be unpredictable in relationships. You'll be all in and all out at the same time, which will be confusing to other people. You'll feel intense need and also intense repulsion at intimate relationships. You may misattune and misread others' emotions. You'll feel conflicted a lot. You'll fear and desperately need relationships. You'll feel confused about what love is. You'll need unconditional love. And if you're an adult right now, you know that unconditional love is pretty hard to find in adult relationships because, all of us have some conditions, like, no, you don't get to hit me. I don't give you unconditional love when you hit me, for example. But a disorganized person needs unconditional love. They often don't get it, and so then they become reactive. They cannot tolerate the perception of disapproval or rejection from other people. So if you have this style, you feel yourself leaning toward this style, I want to recommend that you do get some therapeutic help, because I would say you probably have a high level of ACEs in your history, and that means there's a lot of trauma that needs to be healed. And so try not to go it alone. It doesn't work very well when you have this style because it's confusing to you and you need someone to guide you. So that's my support to that. If you happen to be leaning toward disorganized, then your traumatized child, if you happen to be raising one, may pull for you to parent unpredictably. You might be off and on scary to them. You might instill fear in your child instead of safety. You might fear your own child. You might even hate your own child sometimes. You might reject them. You may be demanding, unforgiving, frustrated, and harsh. And you may abuse or abandon your child at the extreme. So I'm not saying that to you to make you feel ashamed, because you're not responsible for your attachment style. That happened to you. That's what happened to you in childhood. What you are responsible for, though, is getting help and leaning toward secure attachment behaviors. If you have a child, they need you to do your work. All of us, right? If you have any of the insecure attachment styles, our children need us, need you to do your work, to learn how to become a secure base for your children. Because above all things, they need you to be a secure place, a safe place. They need felt safety, which means you need to be their person who always has their back and never turns on them. And that's a really hard thing to be if you have these other attachment styles besides secure. And even if you're secure, you may struggle with that, but you're able to override it most of the time. So, what are some secure attachment skills you can be looking at learning? If you want to move from insecure to earned secure, then you're going to need probably to get some help to understand your own personal narrative. For example, what happened to you? You need to be able to develop a coherent narrative about your life. What happens from conception all the way till now? What happened? How did you feel about it? How did that affect you? What are your belief systems that are coming up around that? Are they limiting beliefs? Are they good beliefs? Are they ones that help you or hurt you? Those have to be explored and questioned and then corrected if they turn out to be limiting or harmful to you. You have to learn how to share your vulnerability with friends and partners and family if they're safe. You have to learn regulation skills. Utmost importance right there is learning regulation skills. You have to learn acceptance skills, how to accept other people and life on its own terms rather than trying to control or manipulate other people to be who you want them to be. You have to learn giving skills, how to give of yourself unconditionally. You have to learn attunement skills, like how to make eye contact, soft eye contact, how to have a soft face and a soft voice and a soft tone so that you create felt safety around you so that your child doesn't fear you because your natural tones may not be comforting and soothing and safe. You need to learn prosody skills. Prosody is just the sound of your voice. If you listen to my voice right now, I am using a fairly prosaic voice, meaning I'm not having stutteral blah, I'm not da, yeah. I don't sound like that because that would be disconcerting to a child. And you need to learn reciprocity skills, how to give and how to take. You have to 100% learn how to repair genuinely. What is a repair to a child who might have done something to you and you did something back to? You still need to repair with them without blaming them for why you did it. So, hey, that's your attachment ACES 101 primer for the day. I hope the simplicity of this helps to understand it a little bit, and that your role really is to get a coherent narrative. Do some work for yourself to figure out what happened to you. What is your attachment style? There are some quizzes you can take on attachment style that are quite good. You can Google that as well. Attachment style quiz would be a great thing to Google. And then there are a number of different quizzes that are going to come up. And you can take them all and decide, oh, yeah, I'm kind of leaning this way in all three of them, or, wow, they're all different. If they're all different, then I would suggest to you, you might be more disorganized than you think. All right, everybody, I hope this helps. I'm really, really telling you, you are the fabulous people, and I see you, and I know how hard you work on giving your children the best life they can possibly have. And these are some of the ways you can even do better, right? When we know better, we do better. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.